14 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lives.
And 14 Bannerman Road is the name of my podcast about it. This time, The Nightmare Man Parts 1 and 2, written by Joseph Lister, who's previously written The Mad Woman in the Attic and The Mark of the Berserker, and directed by Joss Agnew, with Part 1 first broadcast on the 10th of October 2010, and Part 2 first broadcast on the 11th of October 2010. It's a brand new series, of course, with some very memorable episodes to come, but this is not one that I can recall all that well. From the title, maybe I was hiding behind the sofa. We shall have to see. We still have our 13 Bannerman Road is where, etc., etc., now updated with Series 4 clips. Interestingly, there's a slight tweak to the voiceover. It's no longer a genetically engineered boy genius in the attic, but it's her son, a genetically engineered boy genius. But everything else is much the same. Maybe because they're only doing it for that one episode. Well, no, I don't know why that... We'll see. We'll have to see. Yeah. I just realised after watching the episode and seeing what transpires, maybe they've done a custom one for this one. We kick off with a voiceover from Luke as we fly past the moon to Earth and we zoom in on England, and we cut to him talking into a camcorder about how the world is going to end and it's his fault. And we hear some laughter, which is quite reminiscent of Odd Bob, and whisperings of Lukey boy. And Luke says that he's the Nightmare Man. He's been waiting for Luke for years, and Luke can't stop him. And the recording goes static, and we see a face look round at the camera, and then we roll the titles. We get a card pop up that says 1 year earlier, and Luke is with Sarah Jane, telling her that even though he's just started sixth form, Mr. Chandra is saying that he should take his A-levels a year early, and he's probably going to get into Oxford. And Sarah Jane says that now's not really the time to be telling him this, because the camera pulls out to reveal that they're handcuffed to a bomb in a room full of blue barrels with explosive stickers on them. Enter Celine, and it is the brightest green Celine that you have ever seen. Now, I read different accounts as to why. The first says that because the Celine suits were painted orange to become Bletherine, they had to go absolutely ham on the green paint and bring it back to being a Celine, and they just went too far, or they had the wrong shade, or whatever. The other account says that they didn't repaint it, but instead they did it all in post with colour correction. And I personally believe this theory because in one of the scenes you can see that his collar is green as well, which seems like a mistake that could be made in post rather than something that would be inconsistent between scenes if he was already painted. If you already painted him green, you're not going to suddenly come in and accidentally slather a load of green paint over his collar in a different scene. But when doing it all on the computer, you might just make that mistake. Personally, I would have appreciated if they had sort of explained it away by saying that he was from another Raxacoricofellopatorian family, since they've been introduced now. But in the credits, apparently, I didn't actually sit and watch the credits because I forgot, but apparently in the credits, he is credited as a Slovene. Also, if he was from a different family, that would kind of further confirm that everyone from that planet is evil, which I don't think is a message that they were going for. But I wonder why it has to be a Slovene at all. And then I think, well, we don't actually have that many costume monsters to fall back on in this sort of opening, quick, put a monster in, we need someone to be a threat. And now that Russell T Davies is going to take over Doctor Who again, I do hope that that changes. I know it's not really writing related, but I hope as a showrunner he can bring back some more rubber suits, because I enjoy a good alien like that. You know, I get excited when we see Androvax or Kutlak or someone like that. Much like our Series 3 ending, we're obviously being thrown into something, and so it needs to be wrapped up quickly, and so it sort of becomes a bit of a parody of itself. Ronnie runs in with K9, who stops the bomb. Clyde runs in with a bucket of vinegar and throws it over the Celine, because murder is always justified if the person that you're murdering explodes. And explode he does! Covers the gang in green goo, and a lot of it, as is tradition, very much reminiscent of the end of Series 3. I mean, anyone would think it was airing on Nickelodeon kind of stuff, right? K9 even does his stating the obvious thing when he says bomb neutralized, and then Luke asks Sarah Jane about Oxford again, and she says that he should do what's right for him, so yes, he should go. I'm not sure if we actually did get a card there when it said a year earlier, but we definitely get a card here. It might have just been on the bottom of the screen before, but we definitely get a sort of title card, intertitle I think they're called, that says Results Day. And it's in that typewriter font that Sarah Jane Adventures uses, that I stole for the podcast logo. I think it's the same one that I use on my thumbnails. I think it's Foundation, it's called. And this results say now, Clyde wonders why Luke wants to go to university at all. And Ronnie says that he needs to meet new people and do new things and see the world. And Clyde says that, well, I've already seen the world from space, which is a reference to Warriors of Kavak, which I appreciate. I like that the episodes aren't entirely standalone. It's quite Monster of the Week, but they're not fully interchangeable. They will refer back and acknowledge their own canon, and that's quite nice. Luke's got 4 A stars, because of course he did. I do wonder what subjects he did, though, because we don't get a mention of that. We then cut back to his narration on the camcorder, and he's talking about how he was excited but quite scared about going to Oxford. Again, I wonder what course he's doing at Oxford. We don't get much mention of that either. And he says that's when it started. And we get another intertitle with 4 days to go. Luke is looking out the window at Rani, who's off to school. Of course, he's no longer off to school, so they just sort of wave to each other. He's playing Bulletproof by LaRue in his bedroom. That takes you back, really. You listen to some of the music, you go, oh, right, 2009, 2010. This show is over a decade old. And he wanders into the attic where Sarah Jane and Mrs. Smith are scanning stuff, and there's sort of alien tech around, but it's kind of throwaway. The point of the scene is to show that Luke is having doubts, and Sarah Jane tries to comfort him by saying that he was nervous on his first day at Park Vale, but that turned out all right, and he points out that they were attacked by Sabine. So some things never change, obviously. There's also a joke about Sarah Jane making scrambled eggs, and then we cut to the next scene where Clyde gets a text from Luke about Sarah Jane setting fire to the kitchen. Clyde and Ronnie are talking about how weird it is and how much they're going to miss him, and Clyde talks about how sudden his dad leaving was, so maybe they should wind down their interaction with Luke over the next 4 days so it's not just a harsh cut-off. Again, call back to Berserker, which makes sense, as Lister wrote that one. And I noticed that, at least I think so, that Ronnie has a smartphone now. It's just a little bit weird. It's like, it's that era, isn't it? It's like Community, when they all suddenly have smartphones and start mentioning Marvel. It's just, we just crossed that little threshold there. The buttons have gone from the screen, they're all touchscreen now. Sarah Jane brings in some boxes into Luke's room. She says she got them from Geeta to help Luke pack, which is just nice, really. It's a nice little detail. And there's some sweet dialogue where she says that maybe Rani can help with him getting new clothes, because she doesn't really know what's cool, and then she doesn't know if it's cool to say cool. And then when Luke says, oh, Clyde didn't phone me back, and she's like, oh, well, he's probably just a bit sad, he's probably just missing you quite a lot. And they're just sort of nice mother and son goings on. And then she takes Luke out to the garage, which is the first time we've seen the inside of the garage, actually. And inside the garage is a yellow Volkswagen Beetle that she says she's had done up, and it was her old car, and is Luke's now. And my first thought is, this has got to be a callback to K9 and Company or something like that. But no, apparently it's just a bit of backstory that was invented solely for this episode, which almost feels odd, because it's just kind of prime reference material. This is exactly what you'd do. Like, Luke doesn't really need a car. Sure, he's driving off to uni, but it's not integral to the plot at all. But you think, oh, we've got an old car. Come on, let's do a reference. But no, it's not at all. Oh well, let's move on. Luke says that Sarah Jane being so eager for him to pack and get new clothes and a new car and everything, it just feels like she can't wait to get a shot of him. And so she gets in the car and she confesses that she was very alone before he came along, and he gave her something to live for, and now she is terrified about him going to uni because it feels like she's going to lose him, and his home will always be 13 Bannerman Road, but of course she's going to miss him, and they have a big hug. And by this point, we are now a third of the way through this first episode, or a sixth of the way through the two-parters, and there's only been the tiniest little glimpse of the titular villain. Lister is taking his time to make this a Luke-focused episode, like with his Clyde one and with his Ronnie one. And I like it. It feels like it's time for a Luke episode anyway. As he's leaving, it feels like an appropriate send-off. Just dedicate the episode to him. It's going to be really nice. But of course, speak of the devil, it's night time, and Luke hears the laughter again. He heads downstairs and he hears Sarah Jane laughing to K9. I think they morph the man's laughter into hers, and it's very well done. It's kind of distorted. You can't really spot the join. It's a nice, neat little bit of misdirection where you go, oh, it's the Nightmare Man. Oh no, it's just Sarah Jane. But I think it's kind of both. Sarah Jane is saying to K9 that she's not really going to miss Luke. He's not really her son. She doesn't even like him. She was just kind of stuck with having to look after him. It is incredibly out of character, but Elizabeth Sladen is giving her best shot at selling it. K9 points out that Luke will be gone soon, and she says, I cannot wait. Luke was the biggest mistake of my life. And then a hand runs up Luke's back, and he jolts awake because it was all a dream. A bad dream. A nightmare, in fact. Intertitle, 3 days to go. Luke tells Rani that he had a nightmare, and she says, that's weird because I thought you couldn't dream, which is true. We brought that up before, didn't we? I'd forgotten about that, but that's a really interesting point. And he just tries to downplay it, and Ronnie says, well, okay, maybe it's just that this is such a stressful situation for you that it has managed to unlock something in your brain that you thought you couldn't do. Ronnie goes off to school and talks to Clyde about getting in contact with Luke. And I like that we know what he's doing. We know why he's doing it. We know why it's bad, but it still makes sense. His motivation is sound. He doesn't want a repeat of it being like losing his dad, but in doing so, he's kind of withdrawing from Luke and causing that. So it's not the right thing to do, but we know why he's doing it. I like it. It's the following night now. We've absolutely powered through that day in only 2 scenes. Well, this there's a lot happening in this episode. It is moving at a very, very quick pace. And that's, I think, why the intertitles are necessary. We need to go new day, new day, new day, and really actually set that out for the audience. So, in this nighttime, it's Luke has fallen asleep again. There is laughing, and Luke is at school in his pajamas, and Clyde and Rani are there talking about how Luke is only going to uni because of his alien brain, and he's like, oh, I'm so nervous about going off to uni, but like he's so smart that he's just sort of trying to gain false sympathy, and he's a freak, etc. Sarah Jane pops up like, oh, did someone say aliens? And Clyde and Ronnie say that they're going to stick with Sarah Jane and help her out. And Luke says, well, I'll come back. And they say, but we don't want you to come back. And then they put L's on their foreheads, which I guess is a reference to in The Maldor Woman in the Attic when Sarah Jane says that she didn't know what it meant. So that's quite funny, actually. I like Joseph Lister calling back to his own thing there. The school even looks all weird and dark. I'm not even sure if it's really at school. It's a corridor, but it's got a lot of school doors in it, but it's not really anywhere that actually looks like it's in Parkvale School. Also, with them trying to sell this creepy location, it does contrast a bit with them all doing the L on the forehead kind of. It's a little bit funny, but nah, it's okay. One of the doors opens, and we hear the Nightmare Man's voice. It is a great voice. It's just, I cannot do it justice. You have to listen to it. But Luke says that he knows it's not real, but also he knows that this is more than just a dream. And the Nightmare Man says that he lives in Luke's nightmares and he feeds on them, and Luke's nightmares are beautiful. And I am reminded of the pollen that got into the TARDIS in that episode and became the Dream Lord. It seems like the same kind of idea a little bit, but we'll see what it really is. I'm also reminded then that this is 2010. Series 5 of Doctor Who was aired, which means that Russell T Davies has left Doctor Who as showrunner by this point. So I think he moved to LA, so I'm not sure if we'll get more of Russell T Davies' actually direct influence on Sarah Jane Adventures from this point, or we won't, but we'll have to wait and see with that. Because so far he's only actually had one official writing credit, but I think obviously he is the showrunner of Sarah Jane Adventures. He does have input. The Nightmare Man holds out a flower, and then the door closes, and we see his face through the window, and he's being played by Julian Bleach, who has also been in Torchwood, but more famously, he's played Davros in the revived since 2005 series of Doctor Who. So that's pretty great. We've got Davros's actor in this episode as a villain. Intertitle, 2 days to go. Luke decides to tell Sarah Jane about the nightmares, and she gets Mr. Smith to scan him. We get a Mr. Smith, I need you. It's going in the supercart, don't you worry. K9 gets a bit of a nudge in because of the rivalry. And Mrs. Smith detects that Luke is anxious, but there are no abnormalities because Mrs. Smith is useless. He's not, but sometimes he kind of has to be. And Luke says, well, I must be fine if Mrs. Smith can't detect anything. And then he gets a message from Clyde telling him to meet up later at school. We cut to school, where Clyde has set up a going away party at the school for Luke, which is so nice that I'm not even going to question the setting of a party at school. It's just really sweet of him after Ronnie gave Clyde that nudge and said, hey, you're cutting off Luke too much. And basically, you're doing what you said you didn't want to do. And he listened to that and he fixed it. And I love that. Clyde, great behaviour from you. Love that very much. Untouchable by Girls Aloud is playing, which might make this the first episode with more than one licensed track. I know the BBC has some kind of music deal going on. I don't really know any of the details of it. Luke nudges Clyde to go and dance with Rani, and then he sort of overreacts, saying that, well, I don't want to dance with Rani. Why would I want to dance with Rani? He 100% does. And so Luke just sort of shouts out to Rani that Clyde wants to show her his moves, and they're totally going to date, they're totally going to do it. I mean, they won't, because unfortunately we won't get there. But they were intended to. And I quite enjoy how long it's taking as well. It's natural, it's not an issue, it's not causing problems between them. There's just little bits and pieces, and then eventually one day they might get together. And it's really nice, really. So Luke's not really got any sleep last night or the night before because of the nightmares. So he's actually able to nod off at the party despite all the music playing. And the music slows down and it distorts, and then it blends into a creepy kind of music box theme for the Nightmare Man. All the folk at the party are just kind of milling around like zombies, and the Nightmare Man pops up behind Luke with a balloon in front of his face, a red one at that, and then it bursts and we get our first proper look at him because we've only really just sort of had brief flashes of his face. With all the balloons and laughing, he is very Odd Bob. And I don't know if that's intentional or what, but he's kind of clown-like, but a bit more Jokerish than sort of traditional clown. He's got very pale white makeup on, black around the eyes that kind of runs down his cheek a bit. And he sounds like if a creaky door was a man. I'm going to try and attempt to do something, but if it's terrible, just say it's not a real representation of him. His voice that he's doing is amazing. Go and listen to it. He sort of goes, hello, Luke. Probably nothing like that, really. But he's just... it's just great. Okay, ignore me. Go and listen to it. He's not really scary, but he's definitely creepy. There's that distinction between them. He's being creepy right now. And he's saying that he's the Nightmare Man. And Luke asks, what are you doing in the real world? And he just shakes his head. And then Luke can see himself still in the chair, still asleep. Because this is yet another nightmare. And he says that Luke's fear gives him power. And then he says, you can't say my name, you can't tell anyone about me. And he touches Luke, and he sort of boops him on the nose, and then Clyde and Ronnie wake him up, having spotted him asleep at the party in the actual real world. Ronnie distracts Clyde with cake, because she knows about the nightmares. Luke obviously told Ronnie, but didn't tell Clyde yet. And so he confesses, I just had another nightmare. But the Nightmare Man was right. He can't say his name. So Ronnie just brushes this off as more stress, and then gets him dancing to distract him, I guess. That night, he's typing out a message. We see it's to Maria. That's really nice. But as he's about to type Nightmare Man, he physically can't type Nightmare Man. And the voice echoes through his head again that says, you can't say my name, you can't tell anyone about me, I'm in your head, Luke. And that I'm in your head is like he's trying to convince him that he's not real, and Luke is going mad, kind of like gaslighting. Before gaslighting was even cool as well. We'll see if that's his actual motive, or if he's just kind of messing with him, like I physically managed to get inside your head and now I control you. Might be that kind of thing as well. But Luke drifts off to sleep again. We know what's going to happen. He's in another nightmare. He's in the attic watching as Sarah Jane, Clyde and Rani show it off to a new small boy with brown fringy hair. We get a Mr. Smith, I need you from Clyde. We find out that this new boy is called Josh, and Sarah Jane describes him as her new baby boy, and they seem oblivious to Luke standing there. And Mr. Smith gets a call through from Luke in the dream. Mr. Smith sounds very monotone. He's quite sort of computer voice anyway, but sounds very monotone and almost like he's low on power. and Sarah Jane just tells him to let Luke leave a message because she's got Josh now. The Nightmare Man asks Luke if they've forgotten him already, and then runs a hand up his back to his shoulder, and when Luke turns around, suddenly he's outside. We get a kind of down-low perspective, and kind of our old friend the Dutch angle is making a bit of a comeback, as everyone comes outside at night to dump all of Luke's old stuff and photos and drawings of him, etc., into a bin and set it on fire. I like how this is all definitely a dream, but it's still serious. It encompasses all of Luke's fear about leaving and being replaced and no longer being in the gang. And maybe I'm a bit biased because I don't really remember this one, so it's like getting to watch a new episode for me. But I'm liking it. I'm liking what's going on right now. The gang plus Josh go back inside. They can't hear Luke at all. There might be some kind of symbolism in that, like it showcases the way he perceives he's becoming irrelevant to them or something. Let's not get too GCSE English, but it's that kind of thing. All the nightmares we will see are based around their insecurities. And then the Nightmare Man appears again. He's toasting a marshmallow over that fire because, of course, and Luke asks what he is. I would also like to know what he is. Is he like the sleep pollen? Is he something like the trickster? He says that with one more nightmare from Luke, he's going to enter the real world. He's going to send everyone to sleep to feed on all of their nightmares. And it's going to be so good, and it's all because of you, Lukey. And Luke asks where he's from, and he says everywhere and nowhere, baby. And Luke says that, well, you're just an alien. I've stopped aliens before. And he says, wouldn't it be terrifying if I was so much more than that? Which leads me to start leaning towards he's like the trickster kind of thing. So it's a little bit of a disappointment when we find out that he's just an alien. But he's also kind of from a weird place. We'll get there. It's a bit weird. I do like this kind of, it's dark outside. The Nightmare Man is really playing up the villaininess. You know, wouldn't it be terrifying if I was so much more than just an alien? I'm in your head. This is all your fault. He is creepy, and we're doing that kind of hide behind the sofa thing that Doctor Who was really known for. And I'm really glad that Sarah Jane Adventures has sort of got that. The Weeping Angels were the last I can really remember them doing in Doctor Who, and I hope it's something else that Russell T Davies can kind of bring back, because I think we lost that more with the 12th and 13th Doctors. So the Nightmare Man says, get ready for the end of the world, Luke, an eternal sleep of nightmares, and it's all your fault, and then he does a very high-pitched laugh. And we get another intertitle that says, Final Day. And I just can't help thinking, oh no, the moon's going to crash, but ignore that. So the gang themselves are throwing a little party for Luke in the attic. They're filming it on the camcorder. It's just them. Boys and Girls by Pixie Lott is playing, which means that I think that this episode has as much licensed music in it as all the episodes that have come before it combined. I don't know why they really just went, bam, do it, licensed music for this one, but not complaining. Quite enjoy it. Quite enjoy all the songs that have been played. We cut to Clyde having fallen asleep. Ronnie calls him a lightweight, which implies that he's had some alcohol. We also see them drinking something. And he's 16, or possibly 70. We might have skipped a year when you think about this. I don't know where they were before, because we had now, with the results day for Luke's A-levels, which we know he was doing a year early, which means that he's done a year of sixth form, which means that he's 17. And we had the little bit of a year beforehand, but now we've come into this bit. That means that everybody else should kind of be 17 as well. And we see Luke's getting a car he can drive. You do that at 17. So I can't remember if the last episode kind of led up to them being 17 or if it led up to them being 16 and we jump forward a year. I don't know. I don't think it really matters. But I know that in a restaurant accompanied by an adult at 16, you can have beer or wine, not spirit, and you have to have it with a meal. And so it makes sense that Clyde might have had a bit of alcohol. Sarah Jane might have allowed that. It's a special occasion. I mean, I think legally in private you can drink from age 4 or something because the laws are really weird. But I just didn't think that the BBC, especially CBBC, would have shown somebody technically underage drinking. So I think that's really interesting. Ronnie is also tired, and Luke asks her not to fall asleep, and she says that she won't, but she does. It hits midnight. Luke hears the Nightmare Man saying, "You can't say my name, you can't tell anyone about me again." I like the countdown to, it's sort of, it's the final night, it's one more day before he goes to uni, and it's also one more nightmare until the Nightmare Man can break through. I wish that was introduced a little bit earlier so we were more aware of it, because it's only really come into play in the final day. So Luke picks up the camera. We've come full circle to him recording the video from the start. The Nightmare Man taunts him about falling asleep, and he tries to resist, but he can't. He falls asleep on the sofa, and a purple mass of energy fizzes out of his head. It forms the Nightmare Man, now in the flesh, and Luke is trapped in his last nightmare in a black void, devoid of anything else. We pull out to show how big it is and how alone he is, while he shouts out for the others, and then we roll credits. I've written more notes on this part than I usually do, a full page more at least. I think they just really, really put a lot into this episode. We cover about 5 days in about 30 minutes. We're only getting 6 minutes per day. I mean, one of the days was 2 scenes. It blitzes through them very fast. It certainly keeps you engaged. I think you're just seeing more and more and more coming at you. It's not too fast, but it means that I end up writing a full page more of notes. But I like this one a lot. If it's setting the tone for the series, it's shaping up to be a good series. Bring on part 2. So we have our 13 Bannerman Road, we have our previously on, we have our titles, you know the drill. We come back to the Nightmare Man, creeping around the attic, sitting in chairs, spinning round, laughing, etc. We re-establish that Luke is in the void. The Nightmare Man disappears when Sarah Jane comes in. She spies that Luke is asleep, she puts a blanket over him, she picks up the camcorder, and the Nightmare Man creeps into the room where Clyde and Ronnie are sleeping with big, exaggerated steps. He's wearing his flower on his lapel. He is very, very clown-like. I wonder if that's because of Sarah Jane's fear of clowns, even though he's been mainly terrorizing Luke. I don't know, because Odd Bob obviously was. He basically went, okay, do a clown. Let's say Sarah Jane's afraid of clowns. Let's throw on that fear a bit. Maybe they're kind of doing the same thing again. I don't really know. So when Sarah Jane does actually confront the Nightmare Man, she's not all that scared. So I don't know. It's just an interesting design that they've gone for him. Anyway, he picks between Clyde and Ronnie with Eeny Meeny, and he chooses Ronnie and notes that she's having sweet dreams and he will soon change that. He forms purple energy between his hands, and as Sarah Jane watches a video from Luke, the Nightmare Man puts his hand to Ronnie's head. In Ronnie's dream, she's at home, asleep on the sofa. She wakes up with the TV on. It's on the news. She goes to switch it off. It doesn't turn off, and the newsreader, who is a BBC newsreader, but a fictional one this time, created for the show, Louise Marlowe, speaks directly to her and tells her that's not very nice. And then when Ronnie gets closer to the TV, she reaches out and pulls her in. In the real world, the Nightmare Man says that he needs more, and so he puts his hand to Clyde's head. Clyde appears to be in a burger bar working there. Sarah Jane, watching the video, has got to the bit where Luke explains it all. I like that in order to get around the "you can't tell anyone about me" bit, he didn't tell anyone. He just recorded himself talking to himself and left it for Sarah Jane to find. But I don't like the "you can't say my name" bit, because he can say his name, just not directly to people. So I'd have been happy with "I'm in your head, you can't tell anyone about me," rather than "you can't say my name, you can't tell anyone about me." But hey ho. Sarah Jane sees the old Nightmare Man on the video, and she tries to wake Luke up, and then activates Mrs. Smith with a very panicked "Mrs. Smith, I need you," and she also calls for K9 as well. In Luke's head, the same kind of door has appeared as before, and he goes through it, back into that corridor that he was in before, that's kind of like school, but kind of not. K9 is able to conclude that Luke is asleep. Well done, K9. And Mrs. Smith is able to scan the video and say that the Nightmare Man is a Vishklar from the Seretti dimension. Now, okay, dimensions are always weird in Doctor Who. Let's not even really get into it. But let's just say that while I like that if he's from someplace weird, he's got to enter this world in a kind of weird way through people's nightmares and whatever. I like that. But I almost wish that we didn't get an explanation, or we only got a little bit of a hint, like when the trickster just kind of in passing just referenced what he was. Because the unknown is scary, And now we've got this info. He's basically just kind of another alien. He's just an alien from a weird place. And okay, I understand that they need to stop him. It helps that they actually find out what it is that they're stopping. That's fair enough. But I wonder why he came through Luke, because Luke is basically potentially the only person in the world, possibly in the UK at least, it must be incapable of dreaming. Like, I've never heard of that as a thing. And so it becomes very suspicious behavior when Luke starts dreaming, which seems like a really big mistake on the Nightmare Man's part. If he'd gone through anyone else, they could have just actually attributed it to stress rather than an alien going on. Also, Luke knows about aliens, and just why Luke? We don't get an explanation for that, and I'd like to have known. Maybe it's that when the Nightmare Man gives Luke the ability to have nightmares, they are so powerful that it makes it very easy for him to come through. But I don't know, because they don't say. Sarah Jane confirms that Luke left the video for them to find so that they could save him, which checks out, but it's kind of that TV thing that we've touched on before, where if someone has a theory, that theory must be true. He could have just been recording it, just because I don't know. I don't know why else he could have been recording it, but he doesn't say that explicitly that it's for Sarah Jane to find. I guess that might defeat the object of it then, because then he'd be telling someone about it. I don't know. It's just that thing when they go, "Oh, he must have done this," and everyone just goes, "Yep, he did do that." And even though it's just a theory, the theory that they come up with always seems to be right. In Clyde's dream, Sarah Jane rolls into the burger bar on a mobility scooter. She is significantly older, and she admonishes him for being a stupid boy who never amounted to anything beyond serving burgers. Oof. Sarah Jane is trying to find a way to wake Luke up, younger Sarah Jane out in the real world. She pulls out some sentient concrete from an off-screen adventure, which is quite neat. I mean, it's possible they've had a year's worth of off-screen adventures, so she's got a bit of sentient concrete lying around. And then she remembers Clyde and Rani, so she runs in to check on them. The Nightmare Man hears her coming, and he just kind of tiptoes away. In Rani's dream, she's on the floor in the BBC News studio. When she spots Louise, there is a very dramatic dun, which I enjoy. And Louise reaches out saying, "I need you," and then Rani is put in what I can only describe as news-reading clothes. She changes from her pajamas to looking like a newsreader. And Rani says, "I shouldn't be here, I don't know what I'm doing." But Louise replies, "You're a journalist, aren't you?" And so we're obviously playing with her insecurities about how she doesn't think that she's going to be good enough to actually become a journalist, etc., etc. Old Sarah Jane is going on to Clyde about how Luke is so smart, he's going to become an astronaut, and then she talks about having gone to space herself, and Clyde says, I know about this, and it's implied that she is getting forgetful and dementia is possibly setting in, but we don't really come back to that, so I don't really know why they do it. It's interesting. And she says, "The council want to put me in a home." I say, "I've got a home, thank you very much," which I did not remotely do justice there. I didn't even try. It is delivered in such a way that it can never be topped. You need to watch it. Elizabeth Sladen is a treasure. It's just great. It's just watch her saying that line. Beautiful performance. Back in Rani's dream, because there is a lot of cutting between them, the teleprompter comes up with Sarah Jane's name, and Louise says that they're going to tell the world who she is. Back in the real world, K9 tries to use a sentient concrete to contact Luke, but he lacks the power. The concrete does light up a bit, which is neat. It just looks quite neat. They've obviously kind of drilled something in it and shoved a light in there. Or it looks neat. Mrs. Smith says if he can connect to K9, he can provide the power. So it's nice to see them putting aside their feud when there is actually a proper threat that they need to work on together. Sarah Jane asks what he needs. She lists off all sorts. She even picks up that mind control head device thing from the finale of Series 1. And Mrs. Smith says that he just needs a USB lead, because you still got to have a bit of levity. You got to have her going off about all these alien things that she's got, and then he just needs a USB lead. You know, you got to do it. You got to do it. It's interesting that Mrs. Smith and K9 have USB ports, apparently. It's also, I guess it really is universal. In Luke's head, he is being haunted by the Nightmare Man's laughter, and he's trying to block it out. He's covering his ears. He's telling himself that it's just a dream. The Nightmare Man is in 13 Bannerman Road, and he prances his way down the stairs and then out the door, and he is ecstatic to be outside. He is whooping and hollering. I love the energy that Julian is giving this. He's just fully committed. And Luke calls out, and the Nightmare Man in the real world can hear him. And Luke says, "Come and face me," but he refuses. And Luke says, "Well, why, are you scared?" And he says, "No, I'm just so happy to be in the real world." And he says that Luke has made the monster real, and then he runs off down the street. When Mr. Smith transfers energy to K9, there are sparks, because you got to have the drama. And as Luke sits down in defeat and thinks about how he can't stop him, that is when K9 appears, using the sentient concrete with the power of sci-fi to get into Luke's head. He says that Sarah Jane sent him. He says, "Luke, you need to wake up." Luke says, "I know I need to wake up, but I can't. I wish Clyde and Ronnie were here." And K9 relays that they can't be woken up either. In Ronnie's dream, the screen behind her has changed to include her name, as well as Louise, which is neat. And then it's 60 seconds till they go live, and Louise is saying that Sarah Jane is a menace to society. She asks Ronnie, "How many times have you almost been killed?" And Ronnie says, "But she gave me a better life, and she's my friend." And then Louise says that as a journalist, you need to stop caring about people's feelings. You need to, she may be your friend, but we have a duty to tell the world, the public have a right to know about what a menace she is. You've got to do this. Don't you want to be a journalist? It's very manipulative language that she's using, and you can spot it a mile off, but it's obviously all this stuff that is going through Ronnie's head. In Clyde's dream, he's clocked that this is all fake, because Sarah Jane is just being too mean, too out of character. He tries to leave, but the doors are locked, and she tells him that there's no way out. Out in the street, the Nightmare Man spreads his arms wide, and he fires purple energy into all the houses. The music is very good here, I must say. Back in Ronnie's dream, we just go through all the scenes, just swap them out one after the other. In Ronnie's dream, the news broadcast begins, and Ronnie reluctantly goes along with it. She's stammering, and she's uttering under her breath, "Don't make me do this," but she reads out her bits on the prompt. Luke figures that if he's trapped in a nightmare, and Clyde and Ronnie are also trapped in nightmares, he might be able to communicate with them. Worth a shot. So he just shouts out to both of them, and they can hear him. So that's a stroke of luck. Luke tells them that he's in a corridor with a load of red doors, like at school, so if they can focus and they can imagine those doors with him on the other side, they can get to him. And they both focus, and the doors materialize in the areas in front of them. Louise grabs Ronnie and tells her that Luke is leaving her. He's got his A-levels, he's going off to uni, he's leaving her behind. Don't listen to him. Stay here and be a journalist, which is what you want. And it's interesting for her to say, "Oh, this is your choice, this is what you want," because before she was saying, "Oh, Sarah Jane, you're being controlled by her, you're too young to really know what you want." And there's that contrast there that really gives away that it's all just manipulation, and none of it's really true. It's not going to be the life that she actually wants. Similarly, Sarah Jane is telling Clyde that, "Hey, well, if you can make a door, think of what else you can make if you stay here. You can build yourself a paradise. You never have to leave." But Luke's pleas overcome that temptation. They both run through their doors. Their clothes both turn back to what they were wearing before, too, which is nice, because it feels like it's just suddenly happened as they go through the door, because the cut is obviously placed. They run through the door wearing their clothes in the dream. We cut. We come to the other side of the door. They've swapped their clothes, and they run through the door from that side. So it's as if the second they come through the door, their clothes have changed, and they all sort of act shocked about it, and it's really nice. It's as if it's just suddenly gone bam, and they're suddenly in their clothes again. In the street, the Nightmare Man's powers stop. When they actually run through the door and they close the doors, he hears the slamming in his head, and it's loud and it's painful in his mind. And Luke says a little throwaway line that we don't really come back to, but he seems to imply that the Nightmare Man is from the dimension where our minds go when we dream, the Seretti dimension, which drifts a bit too far into fantasy and away from sci-fi for my liking. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's a kids' show. What matters is the entertainment and the message. You can't go too far and completely destroy the world that you've built, of course, but little things like this are okay, because it's unlikely to ever come up again. So you can have that little bit of poetry, a little bit of fantasy in there if you want. It's alright. Ronnie and Clyde finally learn that the Nightmare Man is behind this, because Luke now actually seems able to tell them. Presumably in a dream, the rules don't apply. The Nightmare Man appears in the attic and shouts "Bad Dog" and zaps K9. which is like as if he zapped my own heart. You can't do that. We love K9. How dare you? And he sends sparks flying. K9 disappears from Luke, Clyde, and Ronnie's shared dream. He zaps Mr. Smith as well for good measure. We've got 10 minutes left of the episode. We've got no real hint of how they're going to get rid of him so far. He's coming in here. He's putting a stop to their plans. Whatever, they don't even really have plans. He seems in control right now. And the Nightmare Man turns to Sarah Jane and says, "You get no help. You must be alone with a little hint of moonlight on your face." Which is a really weird sentence. I don't know if it's a reference to something. It's just always struck me as really weird. You must be alone with a little hint of moonlight on your face. Why does he say that? I don't know. Answers in the comments, please. Also, just to come out of the story for a second, looking at Wikipedia, Ronnie's actress, Anjali Mahindra, apparently grew up in the Midlands. And I feel like there's a little hint of her accent coming through in this episode. I don't know. It's when you think about the way that she'd say London, and like Luke would say London, or even I think it was mum I picked up in this. I'd say mum, and she says it a bit more like mom. There's just a little hint. But Joseph Lister did say in the Mad Old Woman in the Attic that before she moved to Ealing, she grew up in the seaside town that I can't remember the name of. I can't remember exactly where that was or if it was even put in a county, but you can get away with it like that, so it's neat. Maybe there was even a bit of a direction for her to slip back into a bit more of her accent, or I don't know. Maybe it was a mistake, but either way, you can give benefit of the doubt to it, so it's actually quite nice to hear. The Nightmare Man says that he knows Sarah Jane because he feasts on nightmares, and she has had so many, from the things that she's seen to fearing about what may happen to Luke, to when the doctor left her and she thought he was dead. I like the acknowledgement that this kind of life messes you up, because Ronnie brushed it off because, of course, Louise was bad and saying, oh, Sarah Jane's a menace to society, when she's not really. She's out here saving the day all the time. But the kind of life isn't really good for you, and that is a legitimate point to make, and I like that it is actually being made here. So Sarah Jane says she's not scared of him, and she tries to goad him into sending her to sleep, because she says that she's already lost everyone close to her. They've either been zapped or they're asleep. She can't wake them up. What else has she got to live for? This is a nightmare in itself. I would much rather be asleep. And he sees through it. He says that you think if I send you to sleep, you're going to be able to talk to Luke. So I like that despite his childish, exaggerated behaviours, he's not dumb. Like when he just rejected Luke's call to come and face him, because he didn't need to. He was winning. He's going to walk off down the street and zap everybody else. I don't need to come and face you. Screw it. Also, Sarah Jane, this is a really blatant plan that you're trying to set up right now. I see through it. Screw you. But the kids being all together is still painful to him. So he asks why he's wasting time with an old woman when those are together and he needs to deal with them. Sarah Jane is very happy to hear that they found each other. And he clocks that for them to be scared, they need to be alone. When they're together, they're not scared, therefore it's not a nightmare, therefore it's hurting him. So he comes storming in to their dream in the corridor, and Clyde is like, who the hell are you? And so he says, I'm the Nightmare Man. To be honest, Clyde, you probably could have figured that one out. He points at the doors, they open, and he ushers Clyde and Ronnie towards their respective doors with threats of being zapped. Luke can only watch on. Or can he? He stands up to the Nightmare Man. He tells them about how aliens made him to destroy the world, but Sarah Jane helped him to be good, and how he was scared. He was scared that his friends wouldn't be there for him anymore, but they'll always be there for him. They were even willing to follow him from their nightmares into his nightmare for him. Luke concludes that together they're unstoppable, and the Nightmare Man applauds his little speech that says, well, it's not really that effective, and he says, well, the speech wasn't for your benefit. It was to inspire Clyde and Ronnie. It was to free them of their fear. They run back to Luke, they grab his hands, and the Nightmare Man grabs his head in pain. The way I've described it, I think, seems a little bit weak. It's a bit stronger when you actually watch the episode, but it's still quite a quick resolution. That's my... yeah, it's not the worst resolution I've heard. It's a bit like, the power of friendship, but, screw it. That's fine. Power of friendship's good. But it's just all a bit quick, you know. We had 10 minutes left, and there was no. The man was basically winning, and now we've come in and it's just been defeated. It's all a little bit quick. But they force him back into Clyde's door, which is now glowing for whatever reason, and he hops through, and he's met by old Sarah Jane, who goes, "Hello, love," and then he runs around looking for the doors, trying to get out, and he screams, "Children of Earth, I demand you to sleep, and to dream, and to fear. You will fear me." Children of Earth was a Torchwood thing, but that's basically as much as I know. And then Sarah Jane tells him to sit down so that she can tell him about her brilliant son. And he screams, "No!" because he's a villain, and when a villain is defeated, you gotta scream no. And who else to have scream no but Julian Bleach as the Nightmare Man? And then Ronnie says, "You did it." And Luke says, "No, we did it." And Clyde asks, "Well, okay, how are we going to wake up?" And Luke just pinches him. Back in the attic, we see Sarah Jane fixing K9. Mr. Smith seems fine, so you must have just rebooted or something. And Mr. Smith actually asks after K9's health, which is sweet. The gang wakes up. Clyde is the last to wake up. Perhaps because the Nightmare Man was trapped in his nightmare, because his nightmare was the one with old Sarah Jane in it. So maybe that's why he's the last to wake up. Maybe they just needed somebody to wake up last. Maybe I'm seeing things that aren't there. Who knows? Luke goes to check on Ronnie and Clyde, and Sarah Jane talks to K9 and says that for years K9 has looked after her, but now as Luke is going out into the world on his own, K9 should look after him. Outside by the car the next day, Luke mentions in his nightmares that Ronnie seemed a bit jealous of him, and she says, "Yeah, I am jealous of you, but that shouldn't mean for 1 second that I am not happy for you too." And they hug, and it's such a mature response. I love when they just act so mature, and so like in so many shows you get people acting in a childish way or a way that doesn't make sense, and I love seeing those examples of people just acting in a way that does make sense and is really mature and actually sets an example for you to learn from. It's really nice to see. Luke is also wearing a very 2010 kind of scarf, so I guess Ronnie did help with the fashion after all. We get a scene between K9 and Mrs. Smith. We get, "Goodbye, K9. Goodbye, Mrs. Smith. You were adequate company. You could always contact me if you need to. I knew you would miss me." It's very sweet. And then it dampens the moment slightly to bring up that because K9 needed to be written out again because of all the rights issues around him, like, this is a sweet way to write him out, to send him off with Luke as well. But, you know, that's the reality of the situation. And so I think that with this episode, the start was great. I love Joseph Lister's episodes that are more character-focused things. I think we got some things that are a bit over-explained and other things that are a little bit under-explained, but I think that's kind of just how the show is. It can't be perfect all the time. And its ending wasn't as bad as some we've had. It wasn't pulling a virus out of thin air. It wasn't Commander Karg suddenly being able to sprint at full pelt when he couldn't even walk a second ago. But it is a little bit quick and it is a little bit weak. And I think that there was just so much in this episode. I mean, we're not even done yet, but it would have benefited from a bit more time so that we could focus on defeating the Nightmare Man and build up to it more, as much as we spent all that time in part one just focusing on Luke and his worrying about going to university. Overall, though, solid start to Series 4. I did fear that part 2, rather, would be a bit worse, but it was better than I expected. I mean, oftentimes they are. I come back and I watch these and I am kind of blown away by how good they are and how much I really enjoy watching them. But we're not done yet. So, Clyde is worrying a little bit, telling Luke to drive safe. That's cute. And also, when we think about Luke driving safe, it proves how grown up Luke is now. He's gone from this tiny little naive Bane boy to a 17-year-old who can drive. And you think about it and you think of how far he's come and how we've watched him grow up. And when you compare the two people, like, that's really nice. We've had this growth in him, and it's so nice to see. And Clyde says, "Hey, don't forget me." And Luke says, "I literally cannot forget things, so don't worry." They hug. It's very sweet. Sarah Jane comes out and gives him a packed lunch. They're just adorable. And then I want to address an apparently deleted scene that came up around here. I think I recall seeing it, but I can't find it now, so I might be making that up. I might have just read it and then made up the scene in my head. I'm really not sure. because something tells me that it got cut from the script rather than cut from the edit. But Luke is gay. Russell T Davies is gay, and this is his show. But I always thought that they didn't really show Luke being gay because CBBC were a little bit homophobic about having a gay character in kids' TV. You can have your pansexual Captain Jack in Doctor Who all you want, but you can't go around corrupting the kiddies or whatever. But I listened to a podcast that Russell T Davies was on, and he said, as far as I can remember, that he intended for Luke to be gay, but he wasn't really writing a lot of the stories. He just sort of hadn't really got around to it, and because Doctor Who was keeping him very busy. And then CBBC actually came to him and said, hey, we would like to have a gay character in Sarah Jane Adventures, can you make that happen? Which is lovely news. That's really great. So, Russell wrote a scene for the end of this episode where Sarah Jane comments on Luke going off and finding a girlfriend, possibly at university, and he replies, oh, it might be a boyfriend. And Sarah Jane says, I don't mind as long as it's not a Savine. Which I think is very much the way that someone like her would be accepting. It's like, oh, I can accept gay, but if they've got a tattoo, don't you dare bring them home kind of thing. Except in this case, it's don't you dare bring them home if they've hollowed someone out and are living inside them. Which is fair enough. I don't think I'm ever going to get over how awful that really is. And thinking about it, it was fair for the gang to be wary in the last episode of the last series, but then it kind of crossed the line for me when they were in no danger at all, but Clyde would still go on about cooking for the enemy and such. But that was last series. In this episode, Russell wrote that scene, and it's not in the episode. It got cut. We've got no hint that Luke is gay yet. And with Russell being a gay man who wrote very gay shows and very gay characters, and the BBC being up for it, I would like to know why it was cut. It's interesting to me. So I can't really find that out from a bit of cursory Googling. So if anybody does know, please let me know, because that's just interesting that the scene was there and it got cut, and it doesn't feel like there's much reason for it. Maybe they were really, really strapped for time and they couldn't fit in 3 more lines. Who knows? But I would like to know. Anyway, Luke and K9 drive off. I really enjoy that he's overcome his fears, and it's just a happy moment. We got the music swelling. It reminds me of Maria leaving in the first episode of the series rather than the finale, actually. K9 calls Luke Master after always calling Sarah Jane Mistress, and away they go. Credits roll, and we get our next time. And next time, well, do you remember Andrew Axe? Also, the Men in Black. I'm excited. I think I've wrapped up everything I'd like to say about this episode as I've gone along, so bring on the next. But with no Luke in it, it's going to feel maybe a little bit weird. Maybe it's going to give Ronnie and Clyde some more space to show their affection for each other a bit more. We're going to have to see. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you'll join me for the next one. Bye-bye.